and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. And yet again I contemplate naming it that. I could have named it the Kabbalah, Zionism, Illuminati, Luciferianism, Satanism, cultists, New Age, New World Order, spirit cooking, Pizzagate, all these crazy things going on in our world. World War I, World War II, 9/11, the utter and complete destruction of towns and cities and facilities all over the Middle East, economic destruction in the United States, at least 8 times since 1913, when the Rothschilds and others, controlling President Woodrow Wilson, members of the Illuminati, people behind the money for Zionism, securing the Palestinians' land to create the State of Israel for some new paradigm called, according, there's a book even named it, the Jewish Utopia. And apparently, historically, according to the Encyclopedia Judaica and other books, the historic culture of the Jews was the Kabbalah. And they were into mysticism. And the people who were into the Kabbalah throughout the last couple thousand years were often accused of blood libel, sacrificing a human, or sorcery, witchcraft. And these people would not assimilate. So a small portion of the world's people wouldn't assimilate with all of the world. A small little portion into this mysticism, Kabbalah, sorcery, witchcraft, wouldn't assimilate with the rest of us. So the rest of us need to get with the program. We must be the ones at fault. So it would seem the thinking is. They even have anti-defamation leagues and assassination squads and anything to keep the truth away from the people all over the planet. And a lot of Jewish people who are still adherents to God's commandments he gave to Moses on top of the mountain when the Hebrews back then were freed from Egypt. So a lot of Jewish people are still God-fearing, commandment-believing people. They've written books, famous people, famous Jewish people, rabbis, and many others about the truth. Even Ph.D. Henry Macau in Canada, a writer-author, Jewish writer-author, wrote the book Illuminati, the cult that hijacked the world. So I'm not trying to target any individual group. It seems to me it includes a lot of people who are into the Luciferic satanic religion. So it could be anybody, even Christians or atheists and other religions could be into witchcraft and magic and be greedy and selfish and mentally, psychopathically disturbed in the mind, torturing people, killing people, and sexual abuse to the 99th degree with children and people and rape and murder. So much more. And apparently it includes beings from the other side. In the Urantia book, the video I just made, apparently some archangel or supreme creator of our universe called Nabaddon was supposed to, during his leadership and as a creator, visit his planets, different ones, at different times, and become one of his own created creatures. And when he came to Earth, which they called Urantia, this being called Michael came to Earth as Jesus to live among us, according to the Urantia book. Quite popular. Information that was apparently channeled from some entities through a human being. And there is a lot of entities channeling through human beings. So anyways, the video I have here, amazingly enough, synchronicity seems to even affect me. I was visiting a friend and I saw this book on one of her bookshelves. And I said, wait a minute, can I borrow that? Can I have that? Pole shift. Okay, so we've all heard about the threats of a pole shift. Planet Nibiru, Nemesis, the Anunnaki aliens that are supposed to be on this planet Nibiru. And the fact that Zechariah Stitchin says they came here thousands of years ago to mine gold to save their planet. And they needed slave workers, so they took the existing creatures on Earth, mixed their DNA with our DNA after a lot of experiments to create us. And the Palladians claim the same thing. So are the Palladians the Anunnaki? And in the other channeled material, it says the Anunnaki are the reptilians. And apparently the gray aliens are lower level beings that the reptilians control. And the reptilians appear to be the Anunnaki or the Palladians or other beings. Quite a bizarre story. And all kinds of fear on the internet about pole shifting, Planet X, Yellowstone super volcanoes. So what's amazing about this book? Published in 1980. Think about that. 37 years. A lot of people have moved away from cities, away from the coast, because of all this fear-mongering, predicting global warming, saying it's the fault of this planet Nibiru, star system, Nemesis, Planet X, whatever they call it, Herculumbus, coming closer to Earth and causing the planet to magnetically shift. And at some point it's supposed to go boom and maybe do a 180-degree polarity shift, sloshing all the oceans, destroying all the cities, erasing the human race or the created creatures on Earth for the 5th time. The 5th root race apparently is what we are. And there's a prophesized 6th root race of beings that are like super beings. These are the stories. So I'm going to read a little bit from this 1980 seriously condensed book, pretty thick. How many pages? 423 or more? 1980. Prophesized, history, science, research, the mountain ranges. I live in the mountains of North Carolina. Obviously, there was some chaotic event that created the Appalachian Mountains. And they're supposed to be the oldest mountains on the planet. And of course, you have the mountains, the Rocky Mountains, which are newer. I've been out there. And it looks like, if you look at the base of the mountain or drive through the parks, like the big event happened yesterday. It's like somebody demolished a building and everything is crumbling down. Because they don't have a lot of grass or trees in the Rocky Mountains. So that's what amazed me. Look like it happened yesterday. This book, Pole Shift, is fear, propaganda maybe? What do you think? So I realized back in 1980, they were publishing books like that. There were prophets or psychics and other material out there prophesizing some Armageddon, some end of the world event. So what's been going on since that stuff has been written and spread all over the world with fear, using it to create events, justify events, global warming, global cooling, climate change, sustainability, biodiversity, terrorism, World War I, World War II, 911, some kind of cosmic heaven beings or demonic beings from Hades, New World Order, New Age. So what were they doing since 1980? Well, this book was published. Underground bases and tunnels. So there's plenty of material out there to indicate that the lovely people in charge of our planet have been providing money and material to build underground facilities and stock them up for some huge event. Isn't that nice? It gets worse. So they got all these books you can buy. Blindsided, Planet X is coming in 2003. Well, it didn't happen. Earth changes, global warming, ice age, climate change, sustainability, biodiversity, terror events. And they're blaming all we the people. We caused all the problems. Humans are causing global warming. Have to surrender your guns. They use all those terror events, shootings, bombings, to try to convince the public, like they did with 911, that they could go over there to the Middle East and overthrow all those countries, kill the leaders, destroy the towns and cities and infrastructure, bridges, sewer plants, water plants, their crops, fruit trees, water supplies. Zachariah Stitchins tells about the lost book of Enki. And they got these Egyptian hieroglyphics, these beings apparently involved in all of this. Planet X 2012 Survival Guide. Because of books like this, 1980, 37 years. This stuff is in Helena Blavatsky's books. Talking to invisible entities called masters and other beings. Isis Unveiled. Look at the size of this book. We'll be going over this again. Helena Blavatsky, Magic Eyes. The Secret Doctrine. I mentioned that because this material, the chapter I'm going to read, is in this book. He references all this material. Okay, so they're building underground cities. They created World War I, World War II, after they took over the USA money supply with the Illuminati-controlled Federal Reserve, which is not federal. And what else has been going on for the last 100+ years? They've been running this program called Aliyah, recruiting all the Jewish people to relocate back to the Middle East, Palestine, and finally in 1948 or 47 they managed to get the United Nations that they controlled, who apparently were the sponsors for those archways of Baal in New York and London, a portal to the devil. Baal, B-A-A-L. Look it up. And then later on I found out through UNESCO from the United Nations, they were trying to put up 1,000 of these archways all over the world. What's that got to do with this? Everything, I believe. A lot of marketing going on. The joy of Aliyah. Some kind of huge celebration to bring all the people back to the Middle East. Jerusalem area was called Palestine, now called Israel, after a couple thousand years of something called diaspora. Even promoting romance and love. Strangely enough, when you look at these people, they look like people you and I know. This is no small thing. Some big event is taking place, and it involves getting the people to go back to Israel. Aliyah. Apparently, according to prophecy, the rest of the people on the earth can't be controlled or killed or some Armageddon-type war until all those people are rescued and are back in Israel. And if you say, Rick, you're crazy, these people are not that serious. Look at this guy on the ground, Aliyah. Look at these pictures. You can go on Yahoo image site. Look up Zionism, Aliyah. These people look happy? I got a lot more pictures here. Big stack. There's even books, many. I've been going over them. The Controversy of Zion. Zion is, apparently, Zionism, Zionist, communist. People historically who are into the Kabbalah mysticism, apparently, which is also this New Age, New World Order of a Luciferic satanic era. Crazy? And the weapon of choice, of course, is terrorism. All this stuff that's fake news and planned events like 9/11, World War I, World War II, and so much more. Sandy Hook, Boston bombing, Oklahoma City building. What's the truth? And again, there's more books. Racial Zionism. I've been researching this. I never expected it to take me where it has. And apparently it involves the spirit world. Lucifer, Satanism. You think I'm kidding? It involves some kind of thing, mysticism or Kabbalah, and Kabbalists were accused of sorcery, witchcraft. The way of the Jewish mystic. I'm going to read from the book, and again, as usual, that was a lengthy opening, but when I do read from this book, everything I just discussed will make sense. Well, this is an incredible tale, I got to tell you. Remember, the Theophist Society was Helena Blavatsky, who wrote The Secret Doctrine. This is volume 1. It was missing volume 2, which I recently just ordered. And apparently volume 2 has something called Anthropogenesis, the history of mankind. And volume 1 is some kind of cosmogenesis, the creation of the universe. So I got a second book like this coming with the creation of human beings, etc., which tells the story about the different root races, the 4 root races before that were destroyed before this 5th one, our reality, and a 6th root race to come. Let's not forget, the Theophist Society created the Lucifer Publishing Company and Lucifer Magazine, and a lot of the basic material for the New Age movement, which is behind the rainbow agenda, pansexualism, transgenderism, homosexuality, adultery, pedophilia apparently with children, and all kinds of decadent, perverse stuff on TV, and deception and fear-mongering in the media, magazines, TV, movies, radio, everywhere, by the apparently evil entities. You think not? I'll read on. So here's the Secret Doctrine. Here's a 1980 book, Pole Shift. Who would have thunk that? And I'm going to read from chapter 19, The Secret Doctrine of Theosophy, for the creators of Lucifer Publishing Company and Lucifer Magazine. Courtesy of these same peoples is the Zechariah Stitchin material, Planet X, Nibiru, Anunnaki, apparently in cahoots with the Illuminati, reptilians, gray aliens, which are apparently the ones behind this New Age, New World Order, who helped create the State of Israel, took over the USA money supply in 1913 during Christmas vacation. 6 months later, they spearheaded and got the United States into World War I. During World War I, the Germans were winning, and the elite Jewish people, Zionist people, which apparently includes Illuminati, reptilians, Anunnaki, all these entities, to get the money so that Britain could win the war and deceive the American people to get the United States to go fight for Britain. Hence, Germany lost World War I. And at the Versailles trials or hearings after the war, severe punishments were put on Germany. But during the hearings, it came all out about the Balfour Agreement, the treason or the betrayal of Germany to the Britons, so these people could get the Palestinians land to fulfill some kind of historic biblical prophecy. An amazing story. Takes a little bit of work to get there. But let me read on. Page 325. Esoteric philosophy teaches distinctly that after the first geological disturbance of the Earth's axis, Esoteric Philosophy, Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, plus so many more books, Zechariah Stitchin's material, these books I just showed you, Threats of Planet X, the elites building underground tunnels, FEMA camps, HARP systems, microwave transmitters, dumping chemicals in our sky, GMO foods, toxins in our foods, fluoride in the water, mercury in vaccines, bees dying, creatures dying, fish dying. Somebody's trying to rig the program that to make it difficult for we the people to survive at some date in the future. So it seems. So teaches esoteric philosophy that after the first geological disturbance of the Earth's axis, which ended in the sweeping down to the bottom of the seas of a whole second continent with its primal races, of which successive continents or Earths, Atlantis was the fourth, there came another disturbance owing to the axis again resuming its previous degree of inclination as rapidly as it had changed when the Earth was indeed raised once more out of the waters. So they're saying that on Earth 4 different times or more, that masses of land, whole continents, rise and fall. Now, theoretically, not that I necessarily believe it, we don't know what to believe with these people anymore, but the Earth is not just round, it's oval shaped like this, like an egg. Something to do with the centrifugal force, like when you use one of those little tops. So if the egg, which is this shape, changes its direction, and then wants to reshape into an egg, in other words, adjust for the pole shift, so the bulge can be in the center. Because now where the bulge was in the center, it switched over to the North Pole and the South Pole. And so that has to thin out, and the center has to broaden out. Hence, maybe that's how the mountains and all these disturbances are created, because the Earth is not round, it's more this shape. And if you turn it on its side, it has to readjust itself to that shape, and that would cause continents to slip, land masses to crunch against each other, others to pull apart, continents would fall, and a new continents would rise. Just theorizing. And reading this material and using my God-given brain. All right, the statement made in 1888, apparently when stuff like this was published, appears on page 85 of Volume 2, A Remarkable Work of a Remarkable Woman, the book, The Secret Doctrine. So it says in here, 1888. So this book was 1980, and in 1888 they were prophesizing this pole shift and destruction of a new race of people on the planet and a superhuman race to come. Also creators of the publisher Lucy Company, publisher Lucifer magazines. So apparently in cahoots with people from the invisible reality, another plane of existence, assisting in this new paradigm shift on planet Earth. Hard to believe. So Helena Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky, as she is often called, founded an occult organization in 1875, the Theosophist Society. It says it right here in this book in 1980 that it was an occult secret society, Kabbalah, mysticism, magic, witchcraft, organization in 1875, the Theosophical Society. It clearly says it in this book on the bottom, the last sentence. Okay? Putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Now, worldwide in scope. So that would be the New Age material I just showed you. Beware of Familiar Spirits and all those New Age books. I got so many books. I can bring you 100 books right now and show you. Confronting the New Age. We all see what's going on in the media. Theosophy is the term she coined for the study of divine wisdom, or the aggregate knowledge and wisdom that underlie the universe. It has been defined more specifically as the formulation in human language of the nature, structure, origin, destiny, and operations of the cosmos, and of the multitudes of being which infill it. Multitudes of beings that fill up the cosmos. Theosophy is a doctrine. We can also call it the New Age, which is part of the homosexual agenda, pansexualism, that's sex with anything, and transgenderism, and I'm not sure what that is, how you can switch a man to a girl or a woman to a man. Whatever. And all that propaganda, even in the classrooms now for children, they say they don't have to make up their mind right now what sex they are, although they can probably look in their pants and see what sex they are. That's not a deciding factor. It's what you want to be. And to me, it's a bit bizarre. But that's part of the New Age teaching. All right, Theosophy is a doctrine. It purports to be a modern revival of the most ancient traditions on the planet. Traditions that are millions of years old. So they're bringing this teaching of some tradition that's millions of years old. It is chiefly presented to the public by the Theosophical Society. They had that Lucifer magazine and many more books, of which I have numerous, whose international headquarters are in Adya, India. The society is dedicated to the promotion of brotherhood and the encouragement of the study of religion, philosophy, and science to the end that man may better understand himself and his place in the universe, without regard for race, creed, color, caste, sex. You see? The Theosophical Society in America, numbering some 5,000 members, has its headquarters in Weirton, Illinois, where it publishes many books on theosophy, and related subjects, conducts public events, and publish its magazine, The American Theosophist. Notice it doesn't mention here the Lucifer magazine or the Lucifer Publishing Company. Dora Kuntz, whom I mentioned earlier, is currently its president. A drive through the park-like grounds of the Theosophical Society headquarters up to the stately administration building, with its magnificent library and muraled walls depicting the evolution of humanity, is not to be missed. Of course, I'm reminded of the murals on the Denver airport. That's mysterious. If you don't know what that is, go look up the murals at the Denver airport in Colorado and see some bizarre paintings. And even apparently a plaque indicating they come from some kind of Freemasonic origin. Theosophy emanates principally from the writings and teachings of the founder of H.P. Blavatsky. She was communicating with some beings from the invisible realm, Kehuni and another one, Mohattaman, who were supposed to be some kind of masters, who attracted herself to a coterie of learned intellectual supporters, many with psychic gifts and literary talents. Blavatsky's first book, Isis Unveiled, I just showed you that big thick book, was published in 1877 and proved an immediate success. I think we've made one video on that one so far. Series number 120, I believe. A master key to the mysteries of the ancient and modern science and theology. The source of the information, Blavatsky said, were her own teachers, or Mahatmas, like I just said, spiritual masters in discarnate form. They weren't born as human, they were ghosts, who occasionally took physical form on the earth, whose initials were M and K, H standing for Morai, and Kut Hamoni Alas saying. I suppose you can probably try to find this book. I found it accidentally. Isn't that interesting? Coincidences? It's been going on my whole life since I began this investigation. Seek and ye shall find. This stuff just comes out of nowhere. Blavatsky's background is richly colorful and controversial. Born in Russia to nobility, she showed high intelligence as a child of becoming a linguist, I guess a language translator, a fine pianist playing the piano, an artist, and a skilled equestrian, riding horses, working with horses. She also demonstrated psychic powers and official biographical claims. In 1849, at 18, she married a man much older than herself, but separated from him after a few months. She then traveled to the world for many years, visiting North America, Eastern Europe, Egypt, Greece, India, Japan, Nepal, and Tibet. So I guess there was some money in that family. At age 20, she said she met the Master Morai in London, this disincarnate, who told her of the work that was in store for her as founder of the Theosophical movement, and who undertook to guide her both in her inner development and her outward work for humanity. Now, she creates the Lucifer Publishing Company and the Lucifer magazine. I don't think I need to explain to people watching this video who Lucifer is supposed to be. And then, of course, the United Nations trying to put up the Archway of Baal in New York and London, and so many other satanic rituals and symbols all over the world these past few years. And because of the internet, a lot of people are waking up. Doesn't seem to be a joke. Seems to be real. Even in Europe, they had Eurovision, like the American Idol program. In 2014, Conchita Wurst won. Conchita Wurst had a head like Jesus and a body lower end like a woman in a slim silky dress. Think about it. Man, woman, androgynous. Baal, the devil's supposed to be androgynous. Conchita means a female part. Wurst is a sausage, a male part. And this Conchita Wurst was singing The Phoenix Rising with the words in that song, "You Can't Stop Us." All right, in 1852, she attempted for the first time to enter Tibet, where her masters lived, but was unable to do so. 4 years later, she was able to enter, and she stayed there for 3 years, undergoing special spiritual training from her master. She then journeyed to Europe, Russia, and other places until 1867. Where she again went to Tibet for the completion of her training in occultism, mysticism, stuff like the Kabbalah, people being accused of sorcery, witchcraft. That's what it is. Is there probably good spiritual powers and entities? Of course. Apparently there are evil spiritual entities who have power, using it for their own gain. Is that real? It seems likely. In 1873, her master instructed her to proceed to New York City. There, as an official biography puts it, at the height of her exceptional spiritual, mental, and psychic powers, she met many prominent persons who were then investigating the phenomenon of spiritualism. And like I've said before, during the 1800s, before World War I, this research by the Psychic Research Societies of Europe and later the Psychic Research Society of America, I've made videos on this information and shown the books. But this was a super pursuit by many elites all over the world. Interestingly enough, it all went underground after World War II, and even during World War II, Hitler was into this occult, apparently communicating with beings from the other side and getting all the information for technologies, which after the war, all the powers all over the world scrambled over to Germany to confiscate what they could and take whatever scientists and elitist people that were involved that they could. It's called Project Paperclip. And brought them to the United States, and other countries got some of those people and brought them to Russia, brought them to Argentina, brought them to Britain, brought them to France. All the other countries wanted in on this stuff that was going on, communicating with beings from the other side and the technologies. They don't tell you that in school. She came in touch with a number of people who were interested in what she had to demonstrate and teach, and in 1875 the Theosophitical Society was founded. Its objectives were, first, to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood. We've heard that word brotherhood a lot. Of humanity. And the things they've been doing, like 9/11, World War I, World War II, and it's all this other destruction, creating the AIDS disease in laboratories, putting it in LA, New York, Africa. So this universal brotherhood of humanity seems to have an ulterior plan. Second, to encourage the study of comparative religion. And you see those stickers on people's cars where they have all these comparative symbols. Get it? Got it? Philosophy and science. And third, to investigate unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in man. The years that followed saw a rapid growth of the Theosophitical movement, not without setbacks and controversy. However, the history of the Theosophitical Society contains accounts of schisms within and attacks from without, and most devastatingly being charges against Blavatsky for using fraud to produce alleged psychic phenomena. It is also charged that her Mahatmas, these beings she was in communication with, were non-existent and her works largely fiction or plagiarized. Nevertheless, when Blavatsky died in 1891, she had nearly 100,000 acknowledged followers in all parts of the world. All right, continuing to read from the book. The masterwork of Theosophy is the Secret Doctrine, a huge document some 1,300 pages long, published in 6 volumes, including the index. The first part of the Secret Doctrine, Cosmogenesis, that's the one I have, describes the structure and operation of the cosmos. The second part, Anthropogenesis, gives the history or sentient life, the history of sentient life on Earth, human beings, animals, etc. Meaning an account of humanities, plural, that have successfully inhabited this planet from its origin. The perspective of the Secret Doctrine maintains that truth and wisdom have largely become lost to modern man. The universe and man are far older, more complex, more elevated than either science or contemporary religious comprehends. As Blavatsky put it in her introduction to her book, The Secret Doctrine was the universal diffused religion of the ancient and prehistoric world. Proofs of its diffusion, authentic records of its history, a complete chain of documents showing its character, presence in every land, together with the teachings of all the great adepts, exist to this day in the secret crypts of libraries belonging to the occult fraternities, secret societies, whose members, when they join to be initiated, illuminated, put their hand on a Bible and swear under threat of death, having their throat cut and worse, if they divulge the goings-on and the secrets to the profane. And in the similar thought process goes on with the Zionist, Talmudic, Zohar, Kabbalah Jewish people. They call us goy and goyim, animals, and the Masonic lodges and temples call us profane. So are they trying to do us any favors? Elsewhere in the introduction, she says, "Yet there remains enough, even among such mutilated records as survive publicly outside the occult fraternity, to warn us in saying that there is in them every possible evidence of the actual existence of apparent doctrine." So some New Age, one world religion, apparent doctrine. Fragments have survived geological and political cataclysms to tell the story, and every survivor shows evidence that the now secret wisdom was once the one fountainhead, the ever-flowing perennial source at which were fed all its streamlets, the later religions of all nations, from the first down to the last. Now, these are the people who created the Lucifer Publishing Company and Lucifer Magazine, later changing Lucifer Publishing Company to Lucas Publishing Company, which again, Lucas means light. Lucifer is the light bearer. What sort of records survive to tell this story? And remember, this is the book, The Pole Shift. So they're going to great lengths to describe Helena Blavatsky, the Theosophist Society's position and prophecy on a pole shift, that they have happened, and that we're in the 5th race on Earth, and the other 4 races were destroyed, and apparently prophesizing that the 5th race, our race today, will be destroyed. What sort of books survive to tell this story? According to Blavatsky, who refers to them as secret books and esoteric records, the main body is found scattered throughout thousands of Sanskrit manuscripts, some translated, most not. Some of the records have been transmitted only in oral form. Others exist in the large and wealthy lamasseries, some kind of hidden religious organizations, caves or whatever, where subterranean cave libraries preserve them. But aspects of the secret doctrine have been preserved in the wisdom literature of all the world's sacred traditions, hermetic philosophies, occult paths, and esoteric sciences such as astrology. Only the highest initiates in occultism have access to these records. However, they are not available for examination by scientists or scholars, and we have only Blavatsky's word and what she offers in her books that these records actually exist. The reality of the secret doctrine, Blavatsky says, will be proved in this 20th century, the 1900s, as being older than the Vedas, the religion of the Indians from India, which are widely regarded by scholars as being perhaps the oldest religious teachings. She adds in a footnote, this is no pretension to prophecy, but simply a statement based on the knowledge of facts. Every century an attempt is being made to show the world that occultism is no vain superstition. And I think I've been showing plenty of evidence that, I'll call it witchcraft so we can all think about it correctly. But of course there are sharmas and healers who are doing good things. Jesus was healing people. He wasn't evil. But they call it occultism. Communicating with invisible beings from another dimension, another plane of existence, another reality. And even latent psychic abilities we each have within ourselves. But of course they nipped that in the bud by putting fluoride in the water and toothpaste, etc., to calcify our pineal gland so we don't use our psychic abilities. Somebody is suppressing we the people. Once the door is permitted to keep a little ajar, it will be opened wider with every century. So I remember back in 2008 and before that, I said, you know, with the gay marriage thing, it won't stop there. And my friend said, oh, Rick, you're crazy. It'll stop there. And now they're trying to eliminate the age of consent for a young child to have sex. And so much more that's totally a little bit sickening. Spirit cooking, Pizzagate, and so much more evidence worldwide of these disgusting cults and the stuff they're into. The Frankists, the Sabbatans, they're the ones who created the porn industry, orgies and swingers. Apparently these are things that the devil, Lucifer, Satan, and the other names, Moloch, Ra, other beings, just fallen angels approve of. Just saying, it seems to be what it is. The vastness of the secret doctrine is staggering. I ordered the other book today, so I will get the anthropogenesis, the actual descriptions of their story of history. Lemuria, Hyperborea, Atlantis, etc. Should be a fascinating book. This one's fascinating if you can understand it. It takes quite a while to understand Kabbalah, mysticism, and all that, Hermetic teachings. With regard to anthropogenesis, we will capitalize it by saying that there have been other races on this planet before our own. And I think most of us agree to that. There's ancient monuments all over the planet. Specifically, there have been 4, and each has perished in a mighty cataclysm that has changed the face of the globe. I live in the mountains of North Carolina, and a rational person can look at the mountains and see that the ground was turned up on its side. Something serious did happen. No question there. And each has perished in a mighty cataclysm that has changed the face of the globe. These root races were the progenitors of each succeeding root race. And according to the secret doctrine, there will be 2 more root races millennia from now in the long evolutionary ascent back to godhood. Each race, except for the first, began during the declining years of the predecessor. So apparently they're trying to say we're in the declining years of this race, the 5th race, the world as we know it. So that there was overlap among them. So apparently these super beings or new beings are already here. There's an overlap. They talk about ascension, and I've been listening to the channeled material. So if you listen to what I'm reading here, the previous videos I've been making on the previous books I've been researching and reading and sharing, it all makes sense. The cataclysms were the culmination event in a natural cycle of Earth history, itself part of a still greater cycle by which God divinizes the universe. So are we divine beings? How does this thing work? Thus, the cataclysms were natural, predictable events in the life of this planet, and as was the end of the races and the beginnings of other racial forms in humanity. You suppose the Zionist Jewish people who are flocking from all over the world back to Israel, that they plan on being this new 6th race, and that the 5th race, we the people, will be gone out of existence? The first root race people were known as the Chahayas, or shadows, and their existence was ethereal. So the first race of entities on the planet were probably half spiritual, half human, ethereal, close to being pure spirit. So there you go. That is, they were largely insubstantial and free from gross matter, existing in a state appropriate to the Earth's early condition before it condensed into material form as we now know it. The Chehanas continent, or as Blavatsky puts it, the first terra firma, Earth, is called the imperishable sacred land. It never shared the fate of the succeeding continents because it is destined to last from the beginning to the end of the great cycle of creation. You suppose that would be the Middle East, where the great pyramids and sphinx are? What do you think it is? Of this mysterious and sacred land, Blavatsky writes, very little can be said. The second continent, Hyperborean, that's up there by Britain and Germany, Denmark, stretched out its promontories southwestern, so the continent had an irregular shape, from the North Pole to receive the second race. So Hyperborea was the second race, and again that would be from the North Pole to Germany, the northern area, like the Thor in the Nordics, evolved from the first. It comprised the whole of what is now known as Northern Asia. It was a real continent, a bona fide land which knew no winter in those early days. So apparently it was at the tropic zone, but it experienced a pole shift, and now it's in the North Pole. Lemuria is the name Blavatsky gives the third continent, a gigantic continent that stretched from the northern edge of the Indian Ocean to Australia, now wholly disappeared beneath the waters of the Pacific. It also extended horseshoe-shaped past Madagascar, around now what is South Africa, which was then merely in process of forming, through the Atlantic up to Norway. The inhabitants of Lemuria, the third root race, were giants some 27 feet tall. They lived and flourished 1 million years ago, Blavatsky declares, but first came into being 18 million years ago. The fourth root race, the Atlanteans, perished for the most part when their continent broke up and sank between 700,000 and 850,000 years ago. However, a small number lived on until as recently as 12,000 years ago, when the small island remnants of Atlantis submerged. This, Blavatsky says, is what Plato refers to in the Timaeus, one of Plato's books. All right, moving on. It says here in the book, we are the fifth race. The Aryan and our continent is the face of the globe as we see it today. Our race came into being about 200,000 years ago, before the semi-universal deluge, known to geology, the first glacial period, i.e. about 850,000 years ago. Blavatsky says that the glacier periods are due not only to the cause assigned to them by science, an extreme eccentricity of the Earth's orbit, but also another factor, the shifting of the Earth's axis, a proof of which may be found in the book of Enoch, chapter 64, section 11. If the veiled language of the Puranas be not understood. Enoch is quite significant and clear. She says when speaking of the great inclination of the earth is in travail, volume 3, page 152. So that would be in a book called the Puranas, P-U-R-A-N-A-S. Volume 3, Blavatsky gives a long statement that summarizes the theosophical perspective on polar shifts. Remember, this book published 1980. Helena Blavatsky's material in 1888. The source of a lot of the New Age material confronting the New Age. I have many books here warning about the New Age. And remember, these people have a Luciferic doctrine, satanic doctrine. We've seen all the symbols recently. I keep mentioning them. Even that tunnel opening over there in Sweden, that ceremony was just bizarre. Even creatures with horns. Katy Perry, Madonna, Beyonce, Allende Grande in Britain, all these satanic rituals. Lady Gaga, Miley Cyrus, listen to the lyrics. Bieber's, his lyrics. We all know it's true. People don't know that it's intentional. This means again that our globe is subject to 7 periodic and entire changes which go pari passu with the races. So apparently to every race these cataclysmic events happen on Earth. It's part of the design, is that what they're saying? For the secret doctrine teaches that during this round there must be 7 terrestrial pariahs a Sanskrit term of which there are many in theosophy, meaning a state of latency or rest between the life cycles that produce the root race, occasioned by the change of its appointed time. Not at all blindly, as science may think, but in strict accordance and harmony with karmic law. In occultism, this inexorable law is referred to as the Great Adjuster. So apparently there's this Great Adjuster to planet Earth at this time that fine-tunes the planet based on our karma. So I suppose if our karma is bad, and karma can be bad and karma can be good, and you are rewarded if you do good karma, but you are punished if you do bad karma. Why are they using propaganda and promoting decadency, sexual perversion, greed, theft, murder, and everything? Is somebody intentionally trying to create bad karma, so whatever celestial forces there are, by some means of natural laws, we destroy ourselves because we're being led astray. Is that plain enough? All this stuff, all this money, all these books, telling people, don't worry about God, there's no commandments, there's no right, there's no wrong, you can do what you want. Just using my brain here. It's what it says in this book here. The Great Adjuster. Science confesses its ignorance of the cause producing climate vacillations, and also the changes in the actual direction, pole shift, which are always followed by these vicissitudes. In fact, it does not seem at all sure of the axial changes, the Earth changing on its axis. In fact, it does not seem at all sure. And being unable to account for them, it is prepared to deny, this is science, the actual phenomena, the Earth changing its axis altogether, rather than admit the intelligent hand of karmatic law, which alone can reasonably explain these sudden changes and their accompanying results. It has tried to account for them by various and more or less fantastic speculations, one of which, as de Bonsteport imagined, I don't know who this guy is, would be the sudden collision of our Earth with a comet. They're making movies about this stuff, thus causing all the geological revolutions. But we prefer holding to our esoteric explanations. That since Vasa Vita, Manu's humanity appeared on this earth, sounds like an Indian god, there have already been 4 such axial disturbances. So the earth is changed on its axis 4 times. The old continents, save the first, were sucked in by the oceans. Other lands appeared, and huge mountain chains arose where there had been none before. The face of the globe was completely changed each time, and the survival of the fittest. Nations and races were secured through timely help, and the unfit ones, the failures, were disposed of by being swept off the earth. Oh my! Such sorting and shifting does not happen between sunset and sunrise, as one may think, but requires several thousands of years before the new house is set in order. Volume 3, page 329 to 330. And like I said, the astropergenesis Secret Doctrine Volume 2 I just ordered today. And this is the Cosmogenesis, talking about the heavens and the gods and man's creation. A little bit more like Hermetic or mysticism or the Kabbalah. Very complex book to try to understand. I've made videos on this book, series number 84. And I will be rereading it and go overing it. You just have to pound away at this material. And slowly you start to pick it up. In establishing her case for previous axis shifts, Blavatsky often draws heavily upon two ancient sources. The Book of Enoch, I made videos on that. What series was that? #111, I think. All right. Blavatsky often draws heavily upon two ancient sources, the Book of Enoch and the Egyptian astronomical records. So why is the pyramid and the all-seeing eye the Egyptian hieroglyphics on the US $1 bill? Tell me that. The Book of Enoch, she declares, is a resume, a compound of the main features of the history of the third, fourth, and fifth root races. A long retrospective introspect and prophetic summary of universal and quite historical events, geological, ethnological, astronomical, and psychic, with a touch of theology out of the antediluvian records. So, after the Great Flood. That would be on volume 4, page 104. Elsewhere, she says that although astronomers may pooh-pooh the idea of periodical change in the behavior of the globe's axis and smile at the conversation given in the Book of Enoch between Noah and his grandfather Enoch, the allegory is nevertheless a geological and astronomical fact. And as far as the Great Flood goes, native indigenous tribes all over the world have their own story documenting the flood, including the Hopi Indians and down there in Ecuador, all over the world. There is a secular change in the inclination of the Earth's axis, and its appointed time is recorded in one of the great cycles, volume 4, page 294. An example of pole shift reference in the Book of Enoch has already been given. In another, Blavatsky quotes a section in which the angel Uriel tells Enoch, so you got an angel talking to Enoch, Uriel, "Behold, I have showed thee all things, O Enoch, and all things I have revealed to thee. Thou seest the sun, the moon, and those which conduct the stars in heaven." Well, let me repeat that. Thou seest the sun, the moon, and those which conduct the stars of heaven, which cause all their operations, seasons, and arrivals to return. In the days of the sinners, the years shall be shortened. The moon shall change its laws. Just an observation. With this new age and new world order, decadency, pansexualism, transgender, warring, murder, economic destruction, which is intentional, says right here, in the days of the sinners, the years shall be shortened. The moon shall change its laws. Blavatsky comments upon this passage. In those days also, years before the great deluge that carried away the Atlanteans and changed the face of the whole earth, because the earth on its axis became inclined. So the earth changed its poles. Nature, geologically, astronomically, cosmically, in general, could not have been the same just because the earth had inclined. To quote from Enoch, Noah cried with a bitter voice, "Hear me, hear me, hear me," 3 times, and he said, "The earth labors and is violently shaking. Surely I shall perish with it." Volume 4, page 101. So you have to ask and wonder why they're trying to create a sinful earth. Do as thou wilt, Aleister Crowley. All the satanic rituals, Emmys, Grammys, Super Bowl halftime shows, Olympic openings, tunnel openings, the archway to Baal in New York, London, Baal, B-A-A-L, the devil. And then I find out from UNESCO, from the United Nations, they were trying to put up 1,000 of these all over the world. Bringing in demonic spirits, maybe, to possess mankind, because maybe they know there's some kind of cosmically laws that when the earth turns towards a certain polarity, duality is what everybody's talking about, and the polarity that everything seems to be tending is evil versus good, the opposite polarity. Just makes you wonder, who has it in for planet Earth and we the people? I suppose that would be the Luciferian, Satanist, Illuminati, reptilians, Anunnaki, Archons, Watchers, Nephilim. Tell me, what do you think? Anyways, Blavatsky then asked how the apocalyptical author of this powerful vision knew that the planet occasionally inclined its axis. Has Enoch, she wonders, perchance read the statements of Frederick Keyes' work on the deluge, which states, "The position of the terrestrial globe with reference to the sun has evidently been, in primitive times, different from what it is now. And this difference must have been caused by the displacement of the axis of rotation of the earth." Obviously, Enoch did not read Keel. Blavatsky's point is to ridicule science, who say the ancients knew nothing of geography, astronomy, etc. And again, I might point out, I live in the mountains of North Carolina. I've been to the Rockies. I've been around the world a little bit. Down there in Costa Rica, they got mountains. And it's obvious to anybody looking at a mountain that the sediment has been turned up. You can see how the rocks were formed, and they're up on their side. They wouldn't have naturally settled that way to sediment. Soil sediment. And when it hardens, becomes mountains, or even lava fields settle like this. They don't settle like that unless they come down a mountain and they dry as they're running down the mountain. But that would be obvious to identify also. Pools of the lava would collect, it would be like that. So there has been chaotic stress on the Earth's crust, and it has just, you can see evidence of it pulling apart, even with some of the earth splitting where the tectonic plates go over each other, or the earth is creeping under itself, like, what do they call that, the ring of fire around the planet. So there is something going on, I'll agree. But the intense fear-mongering and making it sound like it's imminent, when Helena Blavatsky's book, who has that stuff, that information, was written in 1887 and 1888, 140 years ago. So I think they're using that information for politics and evil forces trying to bring about a new age and a new world order. And whatever happens, happens, but they shouldn't be using it for fear and causing economic destruction and political legislation and action to infringe on our freedoms and our rights. But then that wouldn't help Zionists, the communists, the Illuminati, the elites who want to live like aristocrats while the rest of us live like slaves. Just saying, it seems like that's what's happening. They're using some truths to further their own aim. They don't know what is ever going to happen. Why do all the channeled entities talk about this? And we'll be getting into that. Nancy Leader communicating with the Palladians. Lee Carroll would cry on, speaking before the United Nations. I've made videos on this stuff, and I'll be making more. Key's statement, Blavatsky remarks, reminds her of the statement made by the Egyptian priests to Herodotus that the sun has not always risen where it rises now. Even in the Bible, during the Armageddon or whatever is supposed to happen, the apocalypse, the sun is supposed to rise from the west instead of the east. The sky is supposed to be blackened for 3 days. That stuff, someday something's going to happen. And again, if you look at the mountains, you can see that it has happened, and the mountain ranges are different ages. You can say then it's happened numerous times. But they shouldn't be building underground facilities for their elitist aristocratic selves to survive and attempt or even actually plan to destroy the population on the planet, maybe with some kind of plague, nuclear holocaust. Some weird forces out there, but we all know we're spiritual beings in these biological bodies. So the worst they can do is kill the physical body. They can't kill the spiritual body. So don't allow yourself to be sucked into the evil forces, I would recommend. Keep the faith in God, in yourself. Common sense dictates that this pansexuality and these transgender forces and sex with anything and even children is wrong. Common sense. That's my opinion. And the way people have been mind controlled and programmed, a lot of people will disagree with my opinion. But so far, we still have the First Amendment in the United States and the Constitution, that we have the right to free speech. But they are trying to make that change. They'll call it hate crimes if you don't agree that men should be marrying men, and etc. Occult data show, she declares elsewhere, that ever since the time of the regular establishment of the zodiacal calculations in Egypt, the poles have been triced inverted. So the poles have changed 3 times? Egyptian records penetrate far into antiquity, according to the secret doctrine. 1888. This book I'm reading from 1980. Consider this, how long they've been using this stuff and planning for the new age, confronting the new age. I've got dozens of books about this stuff. Circle of intrigue, all these secret societies working against us, controlling our politicians, planning World War III, and so much more. Causing this event, plenty of evidence that it was intentional. I've been reading this for quite a while. I'm going to make another video on this book. According to the ancient historian Eubus, the Egyptian symbolized the cosmos by a large fiery circle with a serpent with a hawk's head, a serpent with a hawk's head, a snake with a hawk's head, or a serpent being, a reptilian, lying across the diameter. Blavatsky quotes from Mackey's. I think Mackey's was one of the major writers for the Freemasons. the mythological astronomy to explain the symbolism. Here we see the poles of the earth with the plane of the ecliptic, attended with all the fiery consequences that must arise from such a state in the heavens, when the whole zodiac in 25,000 years must have reddened with the solar blaze, and each sign must have been vertical to the polar regions. Volume 3, page 356, Secret Doctrines Books by Helenita Blavatsky. She quotes him further in a footnote in a few pages later to point out that the Egyptians had various ways of representing the poles, one of which of them appearing as straight rods surmounted with hawks' wings to distinguish north from south, and another of which had the poles in the form of serpents with hawks' heads to make the same distinction. Blavatsky's point is to show that beneath the range of symbolic representation of the earth and its rotational axis, there is a unifying concept, namely the poles inverted, in consequence to the great inclination of the axis, with each time resulting in the displacement of the oceans, the submersion of the polar lands, and the consequent upheaval of a new continent in the equatorial region, and vice versa. Volume 3, page 359. Further on, she comments that the two famous Egyptian zodiacs support the assertion of the Egyptian priest to Herodotus that the terrestrial pole and the poles of the ecliptic had formerly coincided. Volume 3, page 429. Moreover, she adds, Mackey collaborates this when he notes in the Mythological Astronomy, I guess I'll have to get that book, that the poles are represented in the zodiacs in both positions. I'll have to pay attention to that and look into it. And in that which shows the poles, polar axis, at right angles, there are marks which prove that it was not the last time that they were in that position, but the first, after the zodiacs had been traced. Capricorn is represented as the North Pole, and the Cancer is divided near its middle. At the South Pole, with its a confirmation that originally had been their winter when the sun was in Cancer. But the chief characteristics of its being a monument commemorating the first time that the pole had been in that position are the Lion and the Virgin, volume 3, page 429. So if you look at an astrological circle with Aquarius, Pisces, Taurus, Libra, apparently it identifies that picture of the sky with the north. But then later pictures of the cosmos symbols, the Aquarius, the Libra, Taurus, astrological symbols, they're changed. And whatever symbol was at the North Pole is not depicted as being at the North Pole, according to what it's saying here. See, what happens is, as we all know, the Earth goes around the sun. And at nighttime, when you're on this side of the sun, say the sun's here and the Earth is here, you see this part of the sky. And when the Earth is over here, you see that part of the sky, which would be a different constellation. So they would draw pictures. And if the Earth changed its axis, then when they drew pictures, they would see a different constellation in a different place. Is that true? More stuff to research. There are many such dark sayings, Blavatsky notes, scattered throughout the Puranas, the Bible, and other mythologies. To a true occultist, they divulge two facts: that the ancients knew as well, and perhaps better than the moderns do, astronomy, geonosy, and cosmography, page 334. Pole Shift, published in 1980, referencing material from Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine of 1887. And I'm only reading one portion of one chapter here in this book. It references many other sources in this kind of thick book. But let me try to finish this video here. And that the behavior of the globe had altered more than once since the primitive state of things. Thus, Xenophon's of the blind faith of his ignorant religion, which taught that the Pantheon, in his desire to learn the hidden truth, made the sun deviate from its usual course, asserts somewhere that the sun turned towards another country, which is the parallel slightly more scientific, however, if not as bold, of Joshua stopping the course of the sun altogether. So there are biblical accounts of the sun being in different places or stopping. Yet it may explain the teachings of the northern mythology that before the actual order of things, the sun arose in the south, and it's placing the frigid zone in the east, whereas it is now in the north, volume 4, page 104. Can you imagine my astonishment when I found this book, visiting a friend sitting on the shelf? And I said, well, can I borrow that? I want to make a video. And then when I checked the publishing date, 1980, I said, man, almost 40 years they've been touting this stuff, and probably beyond. Then I find out they're referencing the Secret Doctrine books, which were 1887, 1886. So 110, 20, 30, 40 years ago? What are we to believe? I have heavily quoted from the Secret Doctrine because it is such a rich source of references to ancient traditions that claim to have maintained data about the cataclysmic history of our planet. But what about the future? Does Blavatsky specifically prophesize a pole shift? Is it possible, according to the Secret Doctrine, to fix a date for the next pole shift? And if so, how does this dating compare with those who have seen thus far? Strictly speaking, Blavatsky is not a prophet, nor would she want to be considered one. From her point of view, true prophecy is simply a rational calculation by a mind attuned to the cosmic processes governing creation and evolution. So it makes you wonder about Nancy Lieder, even having maps on her website, nancylieder.com, channeling the Pleiadians, even showing what lands are going to be still in existence after the pole shift and what lands are going to be submerged. Who are these Pleiadians, these Zetans, and these other entities who are working through channelers, psychics, and mediums? Even Edgar Cayce was predicting a pole change. So I've been seeing in my research. Now I'll have to look into that exactly, what he said. Prophecy is the lawful operation of a higher mind that has access to esoteric data, secret data from invisible beings from another dimension, and knowledge on how to apply them. In other words, prophecy is both reasonable and logical. Conclusions offered as what the world generally refers to as prophecy are drawn through careful and exact calculations based upon esoteric science. Official science, what Blavatsky calls profane science, and of course the Freemasons and other secret societies call the rest of us profane, and a lot of Jewish people, not the nice ones, the bad ones, call us goy and goyim, which means cattle. Just be aware, that's what they think of us, and it looks like the Kabbalah, the Zionist, mysticism, Jewish types had a strong hand in creating the Masonic organizations, Freemasons, Rosicrucian, all these cults. I mean, if you look at the books, Blue Lodge Handbook for the Freemasons, I mean, it talks about King Solomon's temple and all those references to Jerusalem and everything. There is definitely connections anybody can observe. It's just what do we want to accept or deny in our own minds? Do we want to believe the propaganda like a lot of people do and say, no, the religions are evil, Jesus didn't exist, you guys are haters, pansexuality, transgenderism is good, and children can consent to sex even if they're 6 years old? What is going on? Where does up become down and down become up? And 2 + 2 = 5. And why? Because they say so. And if you use your logical brain and saying you disagree, you might become an anti-government belligerent. And if you don't give up your arms when they want to take them, your weapons, etc., and do what else they tell you, go to a FEMA camp or prison, then you would be considered an insurgent. And like Jade Helm 15, they got computerized programs and equipment that will make decisions based on meta tags, what you see on your internet, what websites you go to, books you buy, people you know, people you talk to, what you say when they record it, by monitoring you, spying on you. Computers will make decision who lives and who dies. Crazy? But seemingly true. Anyways, so they call it profane science. If it could agree upon the premise underlying the calculations, would confirm the calculations. Thus, to answer the question posed, Blavatsky does indeed state when further pole shifts may be expected. Blavatsky does indeed state when future pole shifts may be expected. Sometimes you get tongue-tied when you're reading somebody else's writing. But she does not consider her statements to be prophetic in the ordinary sense. They are to her matters of fact, which can be verified through the data she gives. Specifically, she states, remember, Blavatsky is the one who helped create the Theosophical Society, and they're the ones responsible for the Lucifer Publishing Company. And Lucifer's known as the Light Bearer. Later, they changed the name, if you go on Wikipedia, to Lucas Publishing Company. Lucas means light. And they had Lucifer magazine. So apparently, these are the forces behind the New Age, confronting the New Age. Be weary of the New Age. The rainbow agenda. The rainbow is a symbol for the gay agenda and the New Age. Let anyone well acquainted with astronomy and mathematics throw a respective glance into the twilight and shadows of the past. Let him observe and take notes of what he knows of the history of peoples and nations, and collate their respective rises and falls with what is known in astronomical cycles, especially with the sidereal year, 25,660 years. Each sign, Pisces, Aquarius, Libra, is about 2,080 years. And so you total them up for 25,000 something. Different numbers people give, but that's the gist of it. A little over 2,000 years a cycle, like Jesus was born 2,000 years ago at the beginning of the age of Pisces. And now we're entering the age, or we have entered the age of Aquarius. All right, continuing on. It says right here, which is equal to 25,868 years. And that number varies slightly depending on the book you read. Of our solar years. Then if the observer is gifted with the faintest intuition, he will find how to wield and woe of nations are intimately connected with the beginning and close of the sidereal cycle. True, the non-occultist has the disadvantage that he has no such far distant times to rely upon. He knows nothing, through exact science, of what took place nearly 10,000 years ago. Yet he may find consolation in the knowledge of, or so, if he prefers, speculation about the fate of every one of the modern nations he knows of, some 16,000 years hence. Our meaning is very clear. Each sidereal year, the tropics recede from the pole 4 degrees in each revolution from the equinoctial points, as the equator turns through the zodiac constellations. So a lot of us know the Earth is at an angle, and it wobbles over 25,000 years. So when it's pointing here at one point, in 25,000 years, it'll circle around completely of what exact point it's aimed at in the north of the sky. So it'll be pointed here, and it'll just make a big circle and return every 25,000 years. So you get a slightly different view of the sky on a certain day of the year. All right. Now, as every astronomer knows, at present the tropic is only 23 degrees and a fraction less than a half a degree from the equator. Hence, it still has 2.5 degrees to run before the end of the sidereal year. This gives humanity in general, and our civilized races in particular, a reprieve of about 16,000 years, volume 3, page 330. So apparently the big calamity may not happen for 16,000 years. The thing that makes mountains, makes the earth change poles, do a crustal shift, according to this book. But there's more. 16,000 years until the poles next shift. Quite a bit beyond the end of this century, from the point of view of the secret doctrine, which claims to be the most ancient tradition of all. We of the 5th root race have a long time indeed before the ultimate disaster. So it says here. That is not to say, however, that the course of human life on the planet will be free from geophysical threat. Blavatsky comments. The last remnants of the 5th continent, ours, will not disappear until sometime after the birth of the new race. And we've all heard about new races, superhumans, Hitler trying to have a super race, eugenics, genetic engineering. When another and new dwelling, the 6th continent, so the continents as we know them, may disappear, and a new continent, a new placement of earth above the waters, the seas, will exist in the 6th continent, will have appeared above the new waters of the face of the globe, so as to receive the new stranger, the new human. To it also will immigrate, and there will settle all those who will be fortunate enough to escape the general disaster. When this shall be is not for the writer to know, only as nature no more proceeds by sudden jumps and starts that man changes suddenly from a child into a mature man. The final cataclysms will be preceded by many smaller submersions and destructions, both by wave and volcano fires. The exulant pulse will beat high upon the heart of the race, now in the American zone. But there will be no more Americans when the 6th race commences, no more, in fact, than Europeans, for they will have now become a new race and many new nations. Yet the 5th race will not die, but will survive for a while, overlapping the new race for many hundreds thousands of years to come, Volume 4, page 443. Helena Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. This thick book is Volume 1. I just ordered Volume 2. Should be interesting. And apparently there's Volume 3 and Volume 4. Anyways, they have this chart here in this book. And I did read all this. And it gives a little information of the many sources of this pole shifting and earth changes. So I'll briefly go over it. Page 336. The source is the High Archelians Brown, whatever that is. The date of the last pole shift was 5000 BC. So that would be 7,000 plus years ago. The next pole shift is overdue. The previous North Pole location was in Sudan. The next pole shift location, the pole will be near the Philippines, Lake Chad, and the speed of the pole shift will be 1 day. The trigger mechanism for the next pole shift will be the South Polar ice cap falling apart. Okay, another one here has all these different sources and predictions. Charles Hapgood, the date of the last pole shift was 15,000 to 10,000 BC, so 12,000 to 17,000 years ago. The next pole shift he doesn't predict. The previous pole location was in Hudson Bay. And the speed of the pole shift, he said, was several thousands of years. And he feels the pole shift may be underway now. Emanuel Vilkalaski, another source. The last pole shift was 700 BC to 1450 BC. So that would be 27 to 39,000 years ago. Less than 4,000 years. And the next pole shift he doesn't say. And the previous location of the pole was in the Baffinland. And does not predict another pole shift from Emanuel Vilkalaski. Chad Thomas says it was 5,000 years ago BC, so 7,000 years ago, the last pole shift. And the next pole shift is 30 to 500 years from 1963. So that's any time now. And it was in Sudan, so that would be the same as somebody above here on this chart. And the next pole shift, the North Pole will be in the Indian Ocean. It'll happen in 1 day, and the cause will be ice cap and magnetic causes. Adam Barber said the last pole shift was 7,000 BC. That's 9,000 years ago. And the next pole shift is within 20 years. So that was 1980. This book was published, so the year 2000, which a lot of people are saying that it's imminent any day. I just want to point out, Helena Blavatsky's material wrote her book in 1888. This book is 1980. And the pole shift will take place in 1 day, and the cause will be some orbit of the Earth, a minor orbit. Edgar Casey, here we go. The last pole shift was 50,000 BC, so that would be 52,000 years ago. And the next pole shift is 1999 and around the year 2000, so it's overdue. He doesn't know where the previous North Pole was, but he believes the pole shift will take several years, and convection and currents will be the cause, the trigger. The trigger mechanisms will be upheavals in the interior of the Earth. Aaron and Abraham, 70,000 BC was the last pole shift. The next one is due 1999 to the year 2000, imminent, overdue. The last place was 30 degrees west of the present position, was the North Pole. And the new North Pole will be in the tropic region. It'll take place in one day, and the magnetic field decreases, leads to melted ice caps. So we all know about global warming, global cooling, climate change, all this stuff, sustainability, biodiversity. Do some government peoples believe what's in this book? Are they preparing for something without telling the people? Is it intentional, or have they been deceived by forces and occult groups convincing our leaders in the United Nations that this stuff is real? Like Cryon with Lee Carroll testifying before this is in a channeled state. The United Nations was listening to this guy, some being from another dimension. And Aaron Abraham, the comments is, axle shifts 180 degrees, but the core shifts 90, so the new poles form a tropical region. So the actual pole shift will be 180, but the actual crust will be 90. So the crust will slide around on the molten core, but not as far and as fast as the whole planet. Paul Solomon, he doesn't say when the last one, but the new one is supposed to be 5 May 2000. And the new North Pole will be in New England. It'll happen in one day. The cause will be Mars, and the axis remains upright, but the crust slips. Ruth Montgomery, I've got one of her books on UFOs. 48,000 BC, the next pole shift is due in the year 2000, happens in one day, with volcanic eruptions being the trigger. Seasons of Changes, another source, says the next pole shift is 2000. I don't know when the last one was. It's supposed to happen in one day, and a sudden change in solar radiation due to extrasolar conditions. Lenora Hewitt doesn't know when the last one is, not revealed by the source when the next one is, and believes the cause is a foreign planet. Mikio Kushi said the last pole shift was 10,000 BC, 12,000 years ago. Doesn't know when the next one is, believes the new North Pole will be where the British Islands are, and it'll all happen in one day, and human activity not in accord with the order of the universe is connected with the trigger mechanisms. Again, we get back to that karma effect, that how the polarity mindset is of the people of the planet control the destiny of the planet. So if we're all good, then the karma is good, but if we're all bad, then the karma is bad. Destruction. Sodom and Gomorrah. There's plenty of cases of proving this if you believe biblical history and other history. The punishments from the gods. All right, Beard Wallace. Very small print here. I can't see it quite clearly. Doesn't say when the last one, but the next one is within 15 years. Apparently, the trigger will be a dark star. Planet X, Nibiru. The pole shift not explicitly predicted. Rodolfo Buenoves, another person, doesn't know when the last one was, but the next one is 1977, 1982. It'll happen in one day. The cause will be a foreign planet. Planet is named Herculaneum Nemesis, carrying planets with it a dark star. Nibiru, the destroyer. All right, Hopi prophecy. Here we go. They don't know when the last one was, but the next one will be within 25 years. They don't know where the North Pole will be. It'll happen in one day. Human activity that upsets the balance of nature will produce a trigger mechanism. The Bible doesn't know when the last pole shift was or the next pole shift will be. It'll happen in one day. We all know a little bit about Bible prophecy. And divine intervention via earthquakes. Trigger mechanism for the Bible. Nostradamus doesn't know when the last one is, but the next one should be in the year 2000. Happens in one day and caused by a dark star. The Stella group said the last pole shift was 24,000 years ago. That would be 26,000 years. The next one is around the year 2000. Happens in one day. Planets in alignment and polar ice caps are the cause. Helena Blavatsky. 8,000 BC was the last one, 10,000 years ago. The next one is supposed to happen in 18,000 AD. So that's 16,000 years from now. We don't know, she doesn't say where the new North Pole will be, but whatever happens will happen in one day, and it'll be because of the sun and the moon influence. All right, one little bit left to go here. And then there's another chapter coming up, but I'm not going to read that in this video. The last question we need to ask here is whether the secret doctrine identifies a trigger mechanism for axis shifts. The answer is yes, the sun and the moon. But the only reference to this I can find is not very specific. It occurs in the context of an explanation of the meaning of certain myths. These myths contain allegoric data about previous shifts of the earth. Blavatsky remarks, the destruction of the children of Niobe by the children of Lotana, Apollo and Diana, the deities of light, wisdom and purity, or the sun and moon astronomically, whose influences causes changes in the earth's axis, deluges and other cosmic cataclysms, is thus very clear. Volume 4, page 340 in one of her books. Altogether, the secret doctrine presents a portrait of polar shifts that is considerable at odds with what we have seen thus far. Blavatsky, one of the earliest sources of this subject, and claiming access to the most ancient esoteric wisdom, nevertheless makes no prophecies of imminent disaster. Like we see all those videos on YouTube right now, saying they have identified Planet Nibiru coming. Planet X, Nemesis, the Destroyer, Herculaneum, the return of the Anunnaki, as Zechariah Stitchens wrote about. Back to this book. Nor does she allow for the influence of thought forms to affect the workings of the astrophysical mechanisms, astrogeophysical mechanisms involved, though she apparently does not rule that out either. But she does maintain the polar shifts are inevitable, moreover that they are necessary events in the evolution of humanity. So we're the 5th root race, and there's supposed to be a 6th root race of superhumans. The presentation of the data is now complete. We have heard from 3 independent groups, ancient traditions. So I only did one little chapter from this book. There's a lot more to read and talk about. Contemporary physics and scientifically oriented researchers. With all the exhibits are arrayed before us, it is time to examine them critically and weigh them against the current scientific perspectives to see if a coherent and reasonable picture can be drawn from the various sources. This is, to put it in a question, can we make a rational projection that in any way substantiates non-rational but non-irrational predictions? The next section will attempt to do that. So they have a next chapter called Projection, the Outlook of Post-History. And the chapter I just read from The Secret Doctrine of Theosophy, which was from her volume 2. I have volume 1. This is cosmogenesis. So like the book of Genesis in the Bible tells about the creation of the universe and man and everything in 7 days. So cosmogenesis is the religion the Theosophists teach about the genesis of the cosmos. And volume 2, the book I ordered of the secret doctrine, is anthrogenesis, anthropogenic genesis. I'm saying it wrong. But apparently it's the genesis, the creation of the different humans and creatures on planet Earth in God's creation. So I look forward to getting that other book. Big, thick books like a Bible. So no one since 1888 and 1980, they published this book. No one this background. And no one that even with channelers like Lee Carroll channeling Cryon from the other world. And I'll be going over more of the channeled information. What have the powers that be done? What are they planning to do? Well, we know they, according to the books I have, and a lot of stuff you can find on the internet, they are building facilities for the elites to take care of themselves. They're destroying all the towns and cities in the Middle East, securing all that real estate where the ancient beings were who built the pyramids and the Sphinx. So we had inside jobs and who did 9/1 controlled by the elites, Illuminati, Zionists, Communists, and all these other cults, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, witchcraft organizations, Kabbalists, mysticism people. So they're aware of something, and they do big things, World War I, World War II. And they build facilities for themselves. And they have technologies where they train people to use their psychic abilities to look into the future, the past, leave their bodies, spy on enemies, take possession of people. Anyways, trying to keep the secrets, even if they have to kill people. Psychic Warrior, David Morehouse. Series 10. Go watch my videos. I've been at this now, making videos going on 4 years, and reading books since 2005, 13 years almost. Just trying to find out what the heck is going on. So thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.